Hello and welcome to the Bearfoot Miniatures channel, where today we're going to be doing a talkie on a guide for the Warriors of Chaos Arcane journal. We'll be covering the Wolves of the Sea, as well as Heralds of Darkness, and the magic items, as well as the generic units that can fit into any army. So if you like this content, if you want to see it in a podcast format, there is a link below to the Patreon, where, as I said, there's a podcast format of the talkie. You can get early release videos, access to Patreon only videos, such as the Necromunda campaigns that we've not got space to fit on the channel, as well as dice and access to the Discord. So as I said, we'll be covering the Warriors of Chaos Arcane journal. We'll be starting off with the magic items, but first, do I think, rather than waiting you wait till the end, do I think this is a good book and worth it? I think it is an excellent book. It's not only for the army that I play, which, so I am a bit biased, but also I think some of the special rules in there absolutely epitomize chaos. I think the two lists give excellent variation to the armies that we see. Heralds of Darkness is basically what I've been playing on channel since the start. It's a cavalry themed army that represents the Outriders, and a lot of actually chaos is based on the plains between Kislev and Cathay, which is the Great Plains, and the army is perfect for that. This Wolves of the Sea list, I think, actually contains two of the best special rules that has been in chaos. It epitomizes chaos in both a dueling aspect of seeing which champion is best, as well as how you actually gain gazes of the gods. And actually, I think those should be rolled out to chaos in general. They're just so flavoursome. So that is my thoughts on the book. If you are going to buy any Arcane journal and you have a Chaos army, buy this one, because up to now it is my absolute favourite. And I play two of the other armies of the four that there's been journals for as well. So let's start off with the magic items, and then we can get into the separate army lists and the generic units. We're going to start with the magic weapons. Now, this is a section that I tend to not like because, and people that have listened to the channel before will have heard this, the Ogre Blade is just so good, or is comparatively so good. I don't know whether it's too good for the points. Actually, I think it's about right. But other weapons that are that price range seem to be nowhere near as good or even worth it for the points. So we start off with the Insidian Dreadglaive, that's 55 points. It's essentially +2 strength, -1 AP, Armor Bane 1, Killing Blow, 2-hand strike last, magical weapon. It's for Heralds of Darkness Army of Infamy only, and I don't think it is great. You essentially lose an AP and gain Killing Blow and magical attacks on a great weapon for 55 points. Yes, the Killing Blow can be useful, but when compared to 10 points more to get an Ogre Blade, that just blows it out of the water. With the multiple wounds, the not strike last, the not two hands, there's just absolutely no comparison to me. I don't know why you would take the Obsidian Dreadglaive, other than a bit of flavour that is only for Heralds of Darkness. We've got the Dagger of the Dark Pantheon, 35 points. It's strength user, AP -2, so one more than your ensorcelled weapons are normally. Magical attacks, and for every wound that the enemy unit loses as a result of an attack made by the dagger, the wielder may apply a +1 modifier to their next casting or dispel roll. For me, that is absolutely excellent. I think it's a bit of a steal at 35 points. It gives your sorcerers that are usually actually quite good in combat by the time you've rolled on Gaze of the Gods a few times, turn 3 when you're getting into combat. It means that they've got a better hand weapon than normal, a normal ensorcelled weapon, and you're also benefiting yourself by getting into combat, utilising both the combat strength of that sorcerer as well as the magical abilities, because you've got this sort of magic item that happens to be a weapon as well. Is a really nice item, I think. It also allows you enough points left for a spell familiar. So you can have both the Dagger of the Dark Pantheon for 35 points, spell familiar for 15, and that fits in your 50 as an exalted sorcerer. We've got the Chieftain's Blade for 30 points. This is only for a Wolves of the Sea army. And I've got mixed feelings about this one. It's strength +1, AP -1, armor bane 1, magical attacks. And whilst engaged in a challenge, the wielder has +1 modifier to their hit rolls. That takes it out of the range of unit champions. And as we'll see when we get to the Wolves of the Sea army list, you actually want a magic weapon or some sort of magical gear on your unit champions, so that they can be in a challenge and do well. And it's just a bit of a shame that it's not 5 points less. Now, on the flip side of that, it potentially could be far too good for that unique mechanic that they've got. And actually, it works when used in a normal challenge that you'll also get benefits for Wolves of the Sea. So I'd still think it's worth it. It's just a bit of a shame that it's 5 points more than the unit champion points limit cap that you've got across the list. We've got Taskmaster's Scourge for 25 points. Now, this is again another magical item in weapon form. You've got AP -1, extra attacks 1, magical attacks. A model whose unit type is infantry only. Basically, take a leadership check in the command phase. If passed, until your next start of turn phase, the character and unit they've joined gains D3 to their movement. So when you're marching or marching columning, this absolutely blazes your movement characteristic. Going to an average of movement 6 is absolutely excellent for a big block. For 25 points, I think it's a real steal. And I like how Chaos isn't getting these uber powerful weapons. I like how these sort of boons for your champions are actually like magic items in disguise. Because to me, a Chaos champion does well enough actually with a great weapon I've found. Never mind having to have a real good magic weapon. So having like a magic item effect on them gives that magic weapon slot a use, or more of a use. And I'm actually really enjoying these magic weapons in this section. So complete flip from where I normally am in the guides is that I like this magic weapons section. Next, we're going to magic armor. We've got Demonic Plate Mail for 50 points. Infantry or cavalry only. It's a full plate suit that improves toughness and initiative by 1. Now, where I see this being used is on, say, an aspiring champion or something like that that's a banner bearer. And that's because you gain full plate, which normally you wouldn't have access to as an aspiring champion. And toughness and initiative by 1 is helping you stay alive, which is something that battle standard bearers lack a little bit. They lack in that survivability department, I find. People target them and they go down. Whereas because you've already got a ward, you don't need to spec into that with your magical items allowance. And it fits really nicely on that heroes level limit being 50 points. The Magical Serpent Scale Mail for 40 points. It's a Wolves of the Sea army only. It's heavy armor and you gain strikes first. Now, where this sort of fits, because most of your normal champions already have heavy armor, it gives your Marauder Chieftain the ability to take heavy armor. The strikes first rule is obviously a real big bonus. It will keep you alive a bit more. However, I think you'll have to weigh up whether or not that is going to keep you alive more, or something that gives you a regen save on top of your ward, something like that. The Talisman of the Carrion Crow, 45 points. The bearer has the regen 5 and poison attack special rules. We already have Crown of Everlasting Conquest for a regen 5. So you're essentially gaining poisoned attacks for 5 points other than that item. And it feels a little bit, and this is not a complaint by any stretch, a rebrand of Trollhide Trousers that rather than being a common item, it gives you another way to get that regen. Really useful in Chaos. Regen is present in quite a few armies now. And actually, I think Chaos was. This is going to sound ridiculous saying it. Chaos were the absolute hardest guys in pretty much every edition of Fantasy. Whereas now the other armies have multiple instances of regen, as well as full plate on lots of things. This is a way that I think they start creeping back up in character level power. Even though obviously they were always and remain scary, I think this does benefit the characters a fair amount. The poison attacks is a bit tacked on though. That's not massively what I'm worried about as a Chaos champion, which usually has strength 5 for an exalted champion. So going to strength 7 with a lance or a great weapon or something like that. The regen is what we're here for. The Talisman of the Soaring Eagle, 35 points. It's regen. Oh, it's not regen. It's magic resistance -2 and a 5-up ward suffer against attacks that have the magical attacks special rule. So a situational ward, magic resistance 2. What I would have liked to see on this is that it's +1 to your ward. So most Chaos characters come with a Chaos Armor ward of 5-up. The only one that really doesn't is the Marauder Chieftain from the Wolves of the Sea Army list that comes with a 6-up. It feels a bit too expensive to go paying that for a 5-up ward. Yes, you can put it on a Demon Prince, and therefore that Demon Prince ward, I suppose that doesn't even work because the Demonics special rule doesn't specify which ward is ignored by magical attacks. So you sort of get into a loop. Now, magic resistance I'm not the biggest fan of, especially in Chaos where you've got the Infernal Puppet and things like that to protect you. I say that because I found a lot my opponent just targets the unit that doesn't have magic resistance. So they end up doing just as much damage to my army, just in a different place with a different thing. Magic standards, we've got the Banner of the Dark Powers, 50 points, magic resistance 3. To me, not worth it, because again, I don't particularly like magic resistance. It's a shame they don't stack, so you can't stack like obsidian lodestones with this. Seems weird that actually magic resistance competes with each other, whereas say Armorbane stacks. But it is what it is. Not my favourite pick, but we're going to get 3 other really good banners in this list. That's the Banner of the Baying Hound, 25 points. It's a Heralds of Darkness army only. Gain Vanguard. Now we've seen this in a few army lists now for 25 points. Bretonnian Exiles stand out to me. Whereas in Bretonnian Exiles, Pegasus Knights can then get a first turn charge. The only way really that I can see to get a first turn charge using this, doing that sort of cheese, is say like a Manticore with a BSB. There's no real, either that I suppose, or Marauder Huscarls, which are mounted movement 8. They can move their 8 with a demonic mount lord in, move, and then charge their 8 plus 9 being 17. So therefore getting in by an inch. In terms of just 25 points for not first turn charge but Vanguard on any unit, I actually really like it, getting that more positioning. Maybe if you're looking for some terrain, it means that you can put something that would be exposed to fire that then moves forward. Vanguard is just such a super useful rule for getting that unit behind cover on the first turn. And I do think it's worth it. A bit of a toss-up, just depending on how the board ends up laid out, whether it would be more useful having the blasted standard to protect you or Vanguard to hide behind terrain from shooting. But really useful for just getting up the board faster, right? How useful is Vanguard? it is useful. The Sea Raider's Crest is 25 points. Surprisingly, it's in the Wolves of the Sea army list. A unit carrying the Sea Raider's Crest gains fear. If the unit already has fear, it gains terror. Now, there's no units that can take magic banners that already cause fear. Again, the only way that I can really see to do it is one that Phil pointed out when we first recorded this guide. I'm really sorry, Phil, that I've had to do this last minute so that I can get it out for the release day. But Phil pointed out that you could put this on a unit of, say, Marauder Huscarls, put a demonic mount in the unit, and now the demonic mount causes terror. So really useful for dropping leadership by 1 so that your enemy for buy goes less, and therefore you can break them and run them down. So useful in that way. I really like it. It doesn't help you win the combat, but hopefully as Chaos, when you're charging or something like that, you can win that combat anyway. Or I suppose pick better. Icon of Darkness, 20 points. It's -1 to hit modifier against your unit in the shooting phase. Very useful, very useful. 20 points isn't too expensive. It can stack with Diabolic Splendor, which I think is where this is going to be becoming most useful, because that then creates -2 to hit your unit, which is then very, very unlikely that you'll take many casualties in, say, a Knight's unit or something like that from enemy shooting. Enchanted items, we've got the Bloodskull Pendant, 45 points. Models whose troop type is infantry only. Instead of attacking normally, the bearer of the pendant may choose to inflict a single strength 8 hit on every enemy model in base contact, each with an AP of -1 and killing blow. Initially, I was like, oh, not too useful, but actually, the automatic hit skipping out the to hit step means that although your Chaos Lord isn't going to want to use this, an aspiring champion might just, because you've only got 3 attacks anyway, so getting 3 auto hits that will wound pretty much everything on a 2, and if you get a 6, so 50% of the times that you get these 3 attacks, you're getting a 6 on average, because at 3 dice, 6 results. I think it's very useful. I do. It's whether or not it's competitive with when at least I start whittling down my army list, whether this gets taken out in favor of something else. I am a bit on the side of Chaos champions are actually really good anyway and don't tend to tool mine up that much. So we'll see if it actually makes the cut into my list, but as an actual item, I don't think you're really going too far wrong when you're on Aspiring Champion, Exalted Champion with this. Rod of the Damned for 40 points. You essentially gain the summoning spell from Demonology as bound level 2, like the Ruby Ring of Ruin gains Fireball. 40 points is a bit expensive. It's quite a high cast value, and at power level 2, it's likely to be shut down quite often because you'll tend to just scrape into that casting rather than blow it out of the water with level 4 bound spell. Situationally good. If you can hover around the edges, I might consider it on, say, like my Marauder Chieftain that I'll be using in the Wolves of the Sea list, because they have ambush, so can come on and use it in a location where I'll be outside of the range of enemy dispels. I might consider it there. But also then I probably just go for Ruby Ring of Ruin. I like the item, just the amount of times I've used a level 2, tried to cast the summoning and failed, is just very high now. Demon Forged Barding, 35 points. Can only be taken by cavalry in Heralds of Darkness. On the turn in which the bearer charges, the mount and all mounts in any unit they've joined gains +1 to their attacks. I actually really like this. For stacking with, say, Demonic Vigor or Vessel, whichever is the one that gives +1 attack to the models, which affects their mounts. Actually, then your mount is getting 3 attacks. Their strength 4 for a Chaos Steed. it's really actually a scary number of attacks that are coming out of your mounts at that point, and can get really into a blender unit. Even just a regular Chaos Knights unit with Vigor, with, say, an Aspiring Champion with this, will really get into a bit of a blender and be quite useful. So that's another item that actually, Aspiring Champion level, might be really useful on, and you might see cropping up in my list where usually you wouldn't see items on my Aspiring Champions. Finally, we have the Arcane Items section. We've got the Scepter of Power for 55 points. It's a +1 modifier to casting and dispels. However, if you roll a natural double when making a casting or dispel, you suffer a Strength 10 AP -3 hit after all effects of the roll has been resolved. So you'll still get to dispel or cast that spell, but then you'll start suffering wounds. It's 55 points, so you'll only get it on a 3 wound caster. But it's quite the downside, really. When it's competing with the Skull of Catan, which is +1 casting to yourself and everyone within 3 for a similar points level, as well as the Wand of Jet, which is 40 points, and on a double just stops working. It's a choice. It's a bit of a choice. It adds more chaotic element to it in that you could just kill yourself. It's got that downside of chaos. However, I am too cautious for my casters to be using this personally. We've got the Grimoire of Ogvold, which absolutely blows out of the water, I would say. Why we won't ever think of the Scepter of Power again. We'll just always skip to this second item on the list. For 50 points, instead of randomly generating the spells they know, regardless of their level of wizardry, the bearer of the Grimoire knows all 7 spells from their chosen lore of magic, including the signature spell. However, you can only cast your level in wizardry of spells in a turn. Really, really useful. You're never going to get caught out with the wrong spell. Yes, you could take the lore familiar, but you might have selected wrong at the start of the game, or it might just pop up a situation that, oh, this other spell would be useful right now. You're never going to get into that situation so long as you've got the lore with this Grimoire. It fits on a level 2. Yes, it's definitely better on a level 4 who can cast 4 of those 7 a turn. But I really, really like its inclusion. It's just a great magic item. And I think actually one of the things that we'll come to a few times in this guide, I want to talk about it more, but it's really good. And it's hard to talk about something that I feel so strongly is good because I just keep going, oh, it's really good. So we'll move on from there. Excellent item. The Tome of the Dark Gods, 35 points, models with Chaos Mark of Undivided only. When generating spells, the bearer of the tome may discard any number of their randomly generated spells and gain spells from their selected lore of chaos. From the lore of chaos as if they had the corresponding mark of chaos. I actually don't think many of the chaos lore spells are worth it enough to take this item. You might take it as sort of a fluffy choice to maintain your undividedness, but largely if you were going for, say, the Slanesh spell Acquiescence to give your opponent strikes last, rather than taking an item, I'd just take the Mark of Slanesh, and I'd just forgo having, say, Blue Fire of Tzeentch, and I'd just be satisfied with Fireball or the Summoning instead. Yeah, I'm a bit underwhelmed by this magic item, but certainly not to say it's bad. I just get round it by doing other things in my list to get a very similar effect. Next, we'll get onto the Heralds of Darkness army list. Now, this is one that's very similar to the army that I actually have had for 7 or 8 years now, playing 6th, and then brought forward into the old world. Actually, the only reason I've got any infantry in my army, because it's themed on the Mongols, is that I wanted some variation for the channel. I've been playing near exclusively cavalry in this army for a long time now, and this actually stacks up as pretty much what I was playing. So in the army, the differences are that the characters are the same. Core There's no infantry. It's 1+ unit of Chaos Knights, Marauder Horsemen, Chaos Warhounds, and 0-1 Chaos Chariot as core. In special, and that's 33% of your army that has to be taken core. So a bit of an extra bit of core there of 8% extra. But really, this is based around Chaos Knights anyway. You can always just take that extra Chaos Chariot in core and it just tops it up. We've got special, 50% of the army, 0-1 unit of chosen Chaos Knights, 0-1 chosen Chaos Chariot per 1,000 points. Spawn, Chariots, Chimeras, Dragon Ogres. And then in rare, we've got Gorbeast Chariots, Shaggoths, 1 per Dragon Ogres unit, Gigantic Spawns, Chaos Giants, and Warpfire Dragons. So 3 new units in that list. The Giant Spawn, Warpfire Dragon, and chosen Chaos Chariots, which we'll get over after the army special rules. Included in this list is the Mercenaries, which are Centaur Chieftains and Centaur Herds, which I really, really appreciate the inclusion of. I've actually got 2 Centaur Herds for inclusion in my cavalry army because the myth of Centaur being thought to be based on steppe tribes and then being like a fusion of man and beast into one, like man-beast fusion, I really like, and it's sort of like speaks to chaos as well. The Centaur models have always been favourites of mine in that they get the essence of chaos and sort of half look. Do you know what? Not going to beat around it. Quite look how a little bit derpy they look because I'm starting to appreciate that as I get older. You can get a battle standard bearer on an exalted champion or aspiring champion, and we'll get into the special rules. Mounted host, all characters must have mounts or have the Fly X special rule. It's expected, right? It's got to be on a horse because everyone else is. Steeds of Darkness, when a unit whose troop type is cavalry or chariot makes a charge, flee, or pursuit roll, reroll all dice that roll a natural 1, may reroll, before discarding any dice that they are required to discard. Just a slight boost to those cavalry units. Actually, I don't think the all cavalry army needs a massive boost to it. I don't think it's an absolute tournament steamroller, though I think it can be used very successfully. I wouldn't be surprised if people did win tournaments that aren't me with with this army list. Like, you've got the Dragon Ogres in there. All the component parts are there. I just think there needs to a champion of chaos come along to put it all together. So I don't think they needed a big boost in this army list. I think they've got this slight boost that balances out the options that you lose for being all mounted. And I think it's actually quite good as a special rule level that we're not going to be seeing, oh my god, the Heralds of Darkness army, you're a horrible person if you take it because of this special rule. Think it's at a good level. It's just a nice little boost. The Shadow Grows is final, and basically you need a 1-for-1 parity of characters and units that don't have the Mark of Chaos Undivided. So if you take a sorcerer with Mark of Tzeentch, you've got to take a unit with Mark of Tzeentch. And if you take a unit, you've got to take a sorcerer. So you can't just add a unit of Marauder Horse with Tzeentch and say, oh, well, I don't have a character, so I don't need another unit. Yeah, they've just covered their bases in that, saying it both ways. I quite like it. It represents like the war bands, I suppose, tacking onto the army and each being led by a champion. So a really nice, chaotic rule. I'm glad that they didn't have it on Mark of Undivided units as well, so I don't need an overwhelming amount of characters in the army. But it's in a nice place, I think, this army list in general. For the actual special units that you get in the army list, we're going to start with the Chosen Chaos Chariots. It's 140 points. You're essentially a Chaos Chariot with an extra attack on your chosen charioteer. You've got counter charge in addition to the normal rules you'll get elsewhere, close order, ensorcelled weapons, first charge, impact hits D6+1, undivided. You can take your marks, and essentially it's the same as a normal chariot, except with counter charge and an extra attack on each driver. Do I think it's worth it? I actually do think it's worth it. That counter charge is useful when you're in sort of a cavalry standoff, and playing an all cavalry army, actually a lot of the time the biggest threat in your opponent's army is opposing cavalry, because they're the standoff unit that you don't want to get caught out by. So having counter charge to make sure you're getting your impact hits, you can get them into a bit more dangerous situations and expect them to perform. So really appreciate the inclusion of that. I think it's worth it. And I think it's a bit funny actually because I realized that Black Hawk Chariots, Tomb Guard Chariots, Chaos Chosen Chariots, it's just the heavy infantry option that they get in each of the armies that have a chariot. The heaviest infantry option is being given a chariot. I'm glad it's not in every list ever. I'm glad it's included in the Heralds, but I did laugh a little bit when I was like, oh, they're doing the heaviest infantry in the chariot all the time. We've got the Gigantic Chaos Spawn. Now this is available 0-1 per 1,000 points as a rare slot in Warriors of Chaos and Beastmen. So I like that it's expanded out from the Heralds of Darkness army as well. In addition, I think actually it's in the Wolves of the Sea. So any Chaos variant army from Beastmen or Hordes can take Warriors can take it. It's 145 points, movement 3d6, weapon skill 3, strength, toughness, wound 6, initiative 3, d6+1 attacks, leadership 10. It's a behemoth, so it will have thunderstomp. It can be a gigantic spawn of any of the marks. Its slashing talons are AP -1, gnashing maws AP -3 with strikes last. Though when you cause a wound with the gnashing maws, you regain a wound, so it actually helps keep your spawn alive. Now, you've also got close order, which will trigger because you've got 6 wounds. First charge, which is great because you're ignoring ranks. You're immune to psych, unbreakable, cause terror. You've got random movement, stomp attacks d6, large target, timber. You are essentially a giant. Although your random attacks are different than a giant's, you're essentially a giant that's 60 points less expensive, which I think is an absolutely unbelievable saving. I think comparatively to a chariot, say, yes, you could just roll a 111 on your move, and likely that will happen to me the first time I play it in a battle report on the channel, but you are comparative points level to the chosen chariot that's across the page. Yes, you're in a different slot, so that changes the maths of do you want to take them a little bit. But yeah, 145 points I think is an absolute steal. And they're just so tough, unbreakable, reliable, essentially. Finally, onto the Warpfire Dragons from the Heralds of Darkness army list. This is also available to the Warriors of Chaos Grand Army list as 0-1 in a rare. I would have liked to see it in the Wolves of the Sea, because I don't see why it couldn't have been, but who cares? Is a great model from Forge World, I believe it was originally, and I'm really glad it's back and included in the Chaos list. Now, what is the Warpfire Dragon? It's 375 points, movement 6, weapon skill 6, strength, toughness, wound 6, initiative 3, 5 attacks, leadership 8. So it's a dragon. Why have I wasted your time reading out those stats? It's a behemoth with wicked claws, which are AP -2. It's got Warpfire Blast and Demonic Scales, which are full plate. The Warpfire Blast is essentially a stone thrower with strength 4, 8, AP -1, -3, multiple wounds, D3+1 under the hole. If you roll a misfire, the model loses a single wound, and it's a bit of a shorter range, which is 6 to 24. Useful. So you've got combat power and a properly ranged breath weapon, not just one that works on a flamer template. So you're not forced to get super close. You can fly over, shoot something the opposite side of the battle line, and then be ready to punk something on your turn coming in the next turn. You can be a wizard, level 1 or 2 for plus 30 or plus 60 points with battle magic, demonology, or dark magic. Some really useful magical laws there. Level 2s we've not seen be the best, but actually a dragon that isn't your general can then be placed more towards the flank because you don't need their leadership, and you don't really mind if they get isolated a bit because you're not giving away generals victory points away for them dying. So you can keep them out to the flanks, actually be a bit standoffish with enemy wizards because you are a fly 10 creature. So they can't get near you into dispel range, and you can stand them off a bit, or even just pick on units on the flanks and get your points back across the game. You've got explosive demise. When the dragon loses its last wound, all units, friend or foe within 6, suffer d6, strength 5 hits, AP -2. That is really good, really good. So you want to barrel it into things, and you don't care too much if it dies, so long as you've done damage before that happens, because you're just going to do more damage. And AP -2 is definitely nothing to sniff at. Fire and Chaos. The Warpfire Dragon has a 5-up ward save against any wounds suffered that were caused by an attack that has either magical attacks or flaming attacks. I actually really like the inversion of a demon save there, where you get it against things that are magical. I think it's really characterful and goes with the Warpfire Dragon being a thing of chaos, because surely you just embrace all the magic and suck it in, and it makes you stronger. Now, finally, you've got magic resistance -2, magical attacks yourself, Mark of Undivided, so you're re-rolling, you're only leadership 8, you're re-rolling any panics and things like that. Regeneration 5, Stomp Attacks D6, Swift Stride, Terror, and we've gone over Warpfire Aura. Oh no, we've not. Warpfire Aura, the last thing. Other models, friend or foe, are not permitted a ward save within 3 inches of this model. Excellent. Excellent. So if you run into a unit, if you're about to have a problem with, say, a Dwarf Lord that has stacked up a load of 2-up ward save runes, you run this dragon in next to your own Chaos Lord and just plow through them because you deny that ward save. Really, really useful. This dragon in general is a Swiss Army knife. I usually don't like that, but actually with how dragons stack up with how magic works, you can just take the right powers to be able to cast in combat. Even battle magic for getting hammer hand and getting just more attacks piling in. I just like how it all fits together as a unit. He's in a rare slot, so he's a dragon that isn't contesting into your character's limit. And also, as I said before, isn't your general, so you can be a bit more daring with the dragon. And although a Chaos Lord can largely barrel into things and kill them anyway, you can be more daring with the Warpfire Dragon because you're not giving up victory points or additional victory points. Finally, we've got the Warriors of Chaos, Wolves of the Sea army list. Now, this is my favourite army list out of the book. I know I said Heralds of Darkness is what I've been playing. I think actually the Wolves of the Sea is what I'm going to be playing, because going through the army list composition, it's just excellent for representing basically any Marauder tribe that you might want to do. It seems to be just like sandbox enough that so long as you're happy with the couple of drawbacks that the list has, it's very, very customizable to how you yourself want to play as a player. So what are those drawbacks and what are the differences? We've got characters. There are some differences here. Chaos Lord, Demon Prince, or Sorcerer Lord, 0 to 1 per army. Now that moves the Sorcerer Lord up from the 0 to 1 per 1,000 into 0 to 1 per army. So you can't take a Chaos Lord and a Sorcerer Lord, whereas in a normal Grand Army composition you can do. 0 to 1 Exalted Champion or Exalted Sorcerer per 1,000. Again, the Sorcerer has moved up. So occupies the slot where the Sorcerer Lord used to be. So essentially, you're going to have weaker magic in this army list. I can't see myself taking a Sorcerer Lord in the Wolves of the Sea. You really want to smash someone with your Chaos Lord. That's what I'm going to be doing, at least. You get Aspiring Champions and Marauder Tribe Chieftains, which are a new unit that we'll go over coming up. Core 25%, Marauders, Marauder Horsemen, Marauder Tribe Berserkers, and Chaos Warhounds. Marauder Tribe Berserkers, new unit, nice little core section, does what it says on the tin, and flavorful for the army. Special 50%, Chaos Warriors, Chaos Chariots, Skin Wolves, Huscarls, and Chaos Spawn. Really like this special. I like that you've still got access to Chaos Warriors, because in all the books that you read, say, like, pops into my mind all the time, you've got Gotrek and Felix Trollslayer, where they're in the woods, and the Joseline, I think she's called, the champion of chaos with the white streak in her hair, has her core of Chaos Warriors, even though most of her warband is a different thing. The Bretonian series by Anthony Reynolds, I think, has a core of Chaos Warriors, as well as the Norse tribe that the main bad guy is leading. So I like that you've still got inclusion of Chaos Warriors in the list. Skin Wolves, new really cool unit that I think a lot of us were crying out for. Like, where is it? Where is it? Forge World made such good models, and they are back. Huscarls, a bit of a surprising unit, and we'll get there when we get there. And Spawn, excellent for tying up as like an unbreakable, diverting unit that you want to plow in or even protect your flanks with. Rare, we've got Ogres, Trolls, Dragon Ogres competing in the same slot as the Shaggoth, which is 0-1 per unit of Dragon Ogres. Gigantic Spawns per 1,000 is 0-1, and 0-1 Giant per 1,000. Rare, you can now up to 33% of your army's points limit, which actually can just about get you 2 Shaggoths and a Dragon Ogres unit, is what Phil immediately went to, I think, when he saw this list, because he managed to bring it up when we recorded this video the first time. Mercenaries, 25% of your points limit can be spent on Gors or Ungor. I really like this as well, because I am a big fan of mixed Beastmen and Warriors army lists. Playing 6th edition, where it was just one, basically 6th edition, if anyone didn't know, your general was mortal, beast, or demon, and that set what your core slot was. So if your general was a demon, you got core as demons, and then everything else was special. You could also change that with magic items, and I like things like this being included in the new Total War, or the Old World edition. Total War, I've not made that mistake in a bit. Yeah, I really like the inclusion, because I like the picture of that bestial horde made up of all the different varied followers of chaos. That's how they described in the novels, and we've got allowance for that through the allies system in the Grand Army composition, as well as mercenaries in both of these Heralds and Wolves of the Sea lists. Battle Standard Bearer, you can have a Marauder Tribe Chieftain as your Battle Standard Bearer, or an Aspiring Champion. I like that you can have a Marauder Tribe Chieftain. You can go all Marauder if you wanted in this list, or you could go all Marauder and a Lord, or anything. I really like how it's set up. The core, actually, Marauder Horsemen being part of the core selection, as well as Hounds, is something that has drawn me to it, because my army being all mounted, and it was actually tribesmen, because I was doing a Hung theme, which is obviously Mongolian, as I've said before, and it allows you to set up that tribe, or that Kurgan Hung tribe, which are steppe tribes, and you can do it with this list. And there's nothing that, although it is the Wolves of the Sea list, there's nothing that ties you to it, but it's definitely flavor. Do you know, like, it also has the flavor of it. It's a very, very well done list, in my opinion, for that flavoursome list. Now, in terms of rules, you've got Favour of the Gods. When a character within the army kills an opponent in a challenge, they must immediately roll on the Gaze of the Gods table. In addition, should a unit within the Wolves of the Sea army claim a trophy of an enemy standard, that unit must make a roll on the Gaze of the Gods table. So your entire unit will get a bonus, and half of them on that Gaze of the Gods table are permanent gain long boons. So if you can gain a standard early, you will be getting a unit-wide boon, which is really, really good. I think actually that's how you should just gain Gaze of the Gods throughout all Chaos armies. I started the turn rolling, sort of adds a lot of bookkeeping for me. I prefer just like an additional attack on a character, or +1 weapon skill, or just even a choose one character in the army, so I don't have to do all that bookkeeping. Whereas this, being at specific times you're just forced to do it, I really, really like. Seaborn Raiders, units of Marauders, Marauder Horsemen may have ambushers for +1 point per model. Aspiring Champions, whose troop type is infantry or cavalry, can have ambushers for +10 points. Marauder Champions already have it. Berserkers already have it, and I believe Huscarls already have it. So, no, you don't. But I normally really don't like ambushers, but having ambushers on, say, a Marauder Horseman unit that are really fast and just piling them in behind your enemy, they're still quite cheap. Maybe the inclusion of a Marauder Chieftain as a cheap character option in there, I do really like, because they've got such a long charge range, such a long move. They can get back into position if they're ambushers, leave them out of position after either doing what you wanted them to do, or if your opponent moves in a way that stops your ambushers being useful. Finally, we've got Warriors Duel, the special rule. Instead of rolling off to determine which player takes first turn, you may challenge your opponent to a Warriors Duel. If your opponent accepts, both players choose a single unit champion with 1 wound whose troop type is infantry or cavalry, and they're going to fight a Warriors Duel. The chosen combatants fight as if engaged in a challenge, fighting as many rounds as necessary to determine a victor. Once a victor has been determined, that model's controlling player takes the first turn. If both champions are slain, the players roll off as normal. If declined, the Wolves of the Sea army counts as having won the roll off, so your opponent's basically forced to commit a champion and chance going first, or go second. If a Bretonnian player accepts, they count as having prayed. If they decline, they cannot pray for the blessing of the lady, and units that usually begin the game with it lose it. So really, really harsh on Bretonnians, though it sort of fits their fluff that they should be doing that. They should be accepting those challenges. I love this as a Chaos Army rule. Again, I think it perfectly shows all the Chaos tribes that they're all about champions. They're all these warbands centerpieced around the champions, and just love getting stuck in and having duels. I'd like, in actual game terms, you're going to know that you can do this challenge. So you can spec your own champion with whatever war gear that you want, up to that 25 points limit, as I said, because that's the highest that you can get. But yeah, you can know this is coming and spec into it appropriately, whereas your opponent likely won't be doing it, because I've not seen many people actually taking much of that points limit allowance on their champions up to now. Right, so let's get into the units of the Wolves of the Sea army list. We've got Marauder Tribe Chieftains for 65 points, so they're 5 points cheaper than an Aspiring Champion. They've got an Aspiring Champion stat line, except they've got light armor instead of heavy armor in their war gear, and they've got Chaos Armor 6 up and lacking sorcered weapons. They're on a 25 by 25 base, so don't have to stand out the side of a Marauder unit. They can take a Warhorse, so can actually skirmish along with Marauder Horsemen. And that's actually where I see these being most useful. A lot of the time, I'm using my Marauder Horsemen in a block and sort of taking away that ability to skirmish, because normal Aspiring Champions, being heavy cavalry, can't join a light cavalry unit and skirmish along with them. that unit has to join ranked up in open order if they want the champion to join them. The Marauder Chieftain gets round that by having light cavalry on a warhorse. Other than that, I don't actually see it stacking up well versus the Aspiring Champion. It's not worth the loss of heavy armor, the loss of assault weapons, the loss of 1 point of the Chaos armor for only 5 points. Yes, they are better than a lot of other champions, or at least comparable. But for a Chaos army, they're not brilliant as just your line champion. Do I like them? Yes. Am I going to take them? Yes. Do I think they're the most competitive choice ever? No. Next, we've got the Marauder Tribe Berserkers. These are 8 points compared to, say, Marauders is 6. And remember, you're not forced to take Marauders in the regular Wolves of the Sea army list. They can all be Berserkers. They're 8 points, movement 5, so 1 more than a normal Marauder. Weapon skill 4, strength 3, toughness 4, 1 wound, initiative 3, 1 attack, leadership 7. The champion is 2 attacks, leadership 8. You've got frenzy, so effectively 2 attacks. Come with light armor. Additional hand weapons are 1 point a model, and flails are 2 points a model. So you can very easily get that 3 attacks because of frenzy. The entire unit can take throwing axes, though, unless you're only going to be doing it in your turn, because frenzy giving immune to psychology will mean that you can't do anything but just hold when you charge, so you can't quick shot, like fire into them and stand and shoot if they charge you. But it is what it is. It's nice to have the upgrade. It's nice to have the upgrade. I'm definitely not negative about this unit. We've got Mark of Chaos Undivided, move through cover, which is a really good rule to be having to not get that -1 movement. So it makes your already fast unit even sort of faster through terrain. Open Order, Relentless Warriors, which is a 6-up ward against non-magical attacks. Skirmishers and Warband, which mostly you're going to be doing to re-roll failed charge distances. So he's got quite a lot going for it. For only 2 points a model over normal Marauders, I'd say it's definitely worth it. You've got that extra point of movement, the extra point of toughness. You've got Frenzy built in, which is worth a point based on the Mark of Khorne being worth a point. You've got light armor built in. You've got move through cover. It's just Relentless Warriors. It's just all positives for the Berserkers. Yes, you'll lose control of them a bit because of frenzy, but if you've watched my guide with Carmine, who is basically, we did a competitive chaos guide because he was doing quite well in tournaments with his chaos army. I imagine he still is, which I'll actually drop that guide below. He was taking a unit of Marauders with frenzy, in that they're actually just a good unit for being then immune to psych. And this provides that with also some additional benefits. So a good unit, and under advice, I'm going to claim that a Frenzy Marauder unit is good. And this just has additional benefits. Next, we've got the Skin Wolves. Now these 45 points a model and monstrous infantry, they're movement 7, so 1 more than an ogre, say. Weapon skill 5, strength toughness 4, 3 wounds, initiative 4, 3 attacks, leadership 7. The unit size 2 up. You've got Claws and Fangs, which are just hand weapons. You've got Blood Rage, so if you roll a double when you pass your Primal Fury that you already have, you gain Frenzy. That sort of skirts the downsides of Frenzy, although it's not triggering all the time. It gets around the downsides in that you're never forced to charge because you've not got Frenzy at point of charge. You've got Primal Fury, so when you get into combat, leadership check. If you pass for that turn, you get to reroll ones to hit, and you'll do that every turn, try and pass in that leadership. Yes, you've got quite low leadership, but you don't have loner, so you'll be able to benefit from your Warlord's leadership for those tests. You've got Regen 5, super useful for staying alive. Skirmishers, so a 360 charge arc. You're already very fast, but you've got Swift Stride, so 360 charge arc, Swift Stride, you are now as fast as a horse. except you're an ogre with better weapon skill. You've got Warped Form, which is, although we were disappointed just hand weapons, you can choose one of 3 bonuses every turn. You can get Enlarged Claws, which is AP -1, Armor Bane 2, Barb Protrusions, extra attacks +1, or Toughened Flesh, improved toughness characteristic by 1, and its armor value by 2. So you effectively gain heavy armor as well as your regen and go to toughness 5. So really customizable. You're not stuck into one way of fighting because it's picked every turn. I didn't know Lycanthropy did this to a man, but apparently it does. Really good special rule. Being able to customize like that is excellent. Just tailor to suit. Say you've got charged. I'm going to take toughness and armor this turn. If you really need to get through a heavier armored unit, you can take those armor piercing and armor bane, and you've already got a few attacks. So you're getting triggering of the armor bane too quite a lot. Now, the claws and fangs says count as hand weapons. It's not an additional hand weapon. So I imagine that just you've got 3 attacks. I would be well happy to be wrong on that, but I imagine we'll have to wait for an FAQ because an additional hand weapon is a specific weapon. It's not multiple hand weapons, weirdly. Finally, we've got the Marauder Tribe Huscarls, which are an 18-point light cavalry unit that they're on war horses, normal Marauder war horses, so movement 8. What the Huscarls are is weapon skill 4, strength 3, toughness 4, so you're tougher than a regular Marauder horseman, 1 wound, initiative 3, 1 attack, leadership 7. The first sword is 2 attacks, leadership 8. You come with light armor and can upgrade that to heavy armor for 1 point a model, which you'll surely do. You can take shields for 1 point a model for a 4-up save, so becoming a medium cavalry unit. You've got cavalry spears built in, flails plus 1 point a model. You can take throwing axes and javelins for plus 1 point a model. Any of the marks of chaos, full command, magic standard worth up to 50 points. So here is where you can get that vanguard. Yes, you can put magic resistance on there. As I said, I'm not a fan. What you could do is put frenzy on the unit, even if you're taking a different mark, by taking the banner of rage off the top of my head. Is it the banner of rage? Have I remembered right? Have I played chaos enough? It is the banner of rage. So that could gain you frenzy so that you've got more attacks and hit harder than a regular chaos marauder unit that actually already hit quite well at strength 5, AP -2 with those flails. It's a unit that I really like. You've got Furious Charge, Undivided, Swift Stride, Warband, Counter Charge, Close Order. So Counter Charge and Furious Charge, getting 2 attacks. If you take the Banner of Rage, that's 3. You're pumping out a really high, concentrated number of attacks from the unit. The Counter Charge is a lifesaver in situations and will obviously make your cavalry spears, if you're taking cavalry spears, trigger. It's an excellent unit. Again, I'm coming down to, like, it's a good unit that I really like. How much can I say about it? I think, yes, you can't take knights in the Wolves of the Sea list, but I'm happy with this variation. If I was really looking for a thing to say that's weird, I was actually surprised that this is a mounted unit. Huscarls being like the Danax wielding foot troops that were in like Viking and Anglo-Saxon armies. I am surprised that they were a horse unit, a mounted unit. But I suppose it's a tribe. Chaos champions tend to get horses as they get better and level up. Why wouldn't the best guys get the best stuff, including a horse? And it does feel a bit weird that he's Wolves of the Sea with horses. But as I said, I really like the sandbox nature. If you did want a foot unit, I'd probably just end up using Chaos Warriors on foot and equipping them with like great weapons or something for the Danaxes. And I really like the unit in general. So yeah, that is the last of the Wolves of the Sea units. A really flavoursome army list, a really successful army list. That, along with the Heralds of Darkness, are absolutely excellent. Have really fired my imagination. And I think the final thing that we'll do is go over the special characters, because I hope to actually play the Ruins of Hollum and get it on channel. Hopefully, alongside this video, let's put it out there so that it forces me to do it if I can possibly make it happen. Yeah, let's get into the special characters. So, special characters, we've got Frydaal Chainmaker. She's a 235 point, basically exalted champion with an additional leadership. You've got Storm's Wrath, which is a strength 2, AP -1, extra attacks D3, two-handed weapon that doesn't strike last. So you're getting the same AP as your normal ensorcelled weapon, but you're gaining that strength +2 and extra attacks. So you can come into quite a few attacks with that. I wouldn't say it's one of the terrible weapons. I also wouldn't say it's another one where it's obviously not the best thing ever. You've got Ambushers, Chainmaker, Chaos Armor 5 to go along with your full plate and shield. Commander and Captain, which is Marauders and Marauder type units like Berserkers and Horsemen, gain +1 leadership when within command range to a maximum of 10. You've got Ensorcelled Weapons, Gaze of the Gods, Impact Hits 1, Undivided, Peerless Raiders, and Rallying Cry. Peerless Raiders is 0 to 1 unit of Marauder Horsemen or Chaos Marauders in the same list have ambushers for free. In addition, if Frydaal is your general, you may apply +1 or -1 to determine whether you rock up when using ambushers. Yeah, is any unit of ambushers may rock up. She doesn't have to be included in that unit. It's just herself or those units on the list may rock up. I'm not massively overwhelmed by her being a great character. She's quite expensive for an exalted champion stat line, essentially, plus some upgrades. Do I think she's in a good place for the characters? Yes, because it's not going to be super ragey when you see her. It's just going to be, oh, my opponent or you yourself taking Frydaal have done a themed list, especially if you do it as a Wolves of the Sea army. Do you know, always something where sometimes when someone takes a special character that's super powerful, you just did that for the power level. So I like that actually it's not overwhelming, it seems quite tame, and just seems an option for a character. Next, we've got Galrach the Great Drake. Now, Galrach this is the second time, or the multiple times that we've seen him. It crops up, the everlasting Dragon of Chaos. He's 465 points, is a dragon stats, so 6s across the board, initiative 4 and leadership 9. You're a Behemoth on a big base. You've got Wicked Claws, which is AP -2. 2 types of Fires of Chaos, one of which is Strength 4, AP -1, Flaming. One of which is Strength 2, Ignores Armor. And you can also use Breath of Change, which is once per game. Put the Flamer template down. Anyone whose base is underneath risk being hit. If you hit, the model has to take a toughness test or just be removed from the board, which is bananas. It's a third of the time just removing a toughness 4 model, which a lot of lords are, from the game. Ignoring wards, ignoring regens, you were just, because you're not suffering a wound, you're just removed from play as a casualty. Absolute craziness. You've got full plate. You're a level 4 wizard, knowing from Dark Magic. Armored Hide 1, Close Order, Fly 10, Large Target, Mark of Tzeentch, Regen 5, Spirit of Galrach, which is basically stupidity, but instead of becoming stupid, if you fail the test, you reduce your wizardry to 1 and can only cast 1 spell per turn. Becomes subject to random movement 2d6 and if engaged in combat, must direct D3 attacks against himself. Obviously, at the start of the next turn, you'll roll again and potentially recover from it. It's a chaotic, flavoursome rule, potentially balances out Breath of Change, in that when you get into combat, you could just fail this test and kill yourself, because D3 attacks going against yourself is averaging like a wound against yourself. No, 0.5 wounds. But anyway, it's still taking damage on an expensive character within your list. That also is one of the downsides of Galrach. Basically, it's still competing for the like Lord on Dragon area. If you're taking Galrach, you're spending just as many points in the same section as your Lord on Dragon, whereas say the Warpfire Dragon is a rare slot. Yes, you get this Breath of Change. I really like Galrach as a character. The level 4 means it's really useful as a caster as well. But I think the jury's out on actually how useful Galrach is compared to even, I suppose, a Sorcerer Lord on Dragon that gets to do other stuff, actually gets more attacks because the Sorcerer's attacks add on to the Dragon's attacks as well. But Breath of Change can be an absolutely horrendous weapon for you to just hit your opponent with, and maybe chaotic. If you do like this, don't forget to do all the YouTubey stuff, like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, all of that stuff. It's not something that I'm just loving saying. It's something that does genuinely help the channel by getting the video out to more people. And especially on the early release videos like this, it's important so that I can keep bringing this content to you, by Games Workshop being thrilled with my performance with the video. So with that, we'll get on to the video.